Pensamos.
Yeah. Greg, I thought your three things, your first talk, I believe, things that get in the way of our Bible reading, you said expectation of the sensational, media immersion syndrome, and busyness. I wonder if maybe each of you could comment on this, because you're involved in seminary training and have been for a number of years, related to that second one, the media immersion syndrome. Do you think that web, blogs, social media are changing how people think? There's a new book out, or is it an article, how Google changes the way we think, something like that. Are you seeing people showing up for seminary dumb? More dumb than usual, a little slow, hard to...
Well, I'm trusting Jonathan to keep them out, but I think that it's clear that... I think we need to make a distinction, that clearly media do change the way people think and they write. So often we tend to make the leap to saying that's a bad thing. Right. And I'm not sure that just because the internet, Google, blogs, etc. are changing the way people write and read, we should necessarily jump to saying that's a bad thing. And the printing press changed the way people thought. Television has done the same. There's is it necessarily a bad thing that these changes take place, or do we need to acknowledge these changes and then adapt ourselves to them? And I think one thing that I've consciously been trying to do myself recently is write shorter sentences, because I'm becoming aware that people don't read as long sentences these days. So I think we're blind if we don't think the media are changing things, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, much as I like the way things were in the 70s and 80s. I'm not sure that I should impose the way 70s and 80s were on today and say just because it's different, it's worse. I do think that I think the fact that they have all of these things often coming in on a single gadget can be problematic. I feel this myself. My Bible scheme is on my mobile phone. And I'd noticed that when I'm using my Bible scheme here and I'm reading about that, I'll see an email ping up. And it gets very difficult to read my Bible when I know there's an email waiting for me on my mobile phone. So I've had to I put it into airplane mode. Whenever I use my Bible scheme, I put it in airplane mode. I try to keep my phone switched off as much as I can during times when I'm studying. So I think that it's not so much media is changing the way we think, but we have to be very self-conscious about not allowing it to intrude on periods of time that are to be devoted to other things. That would be my own experience of.
That's great.
My focus was not so much on the internet, but more on the television media, perhaps radio media, where in our times of relaxation especially, we're uncritically exposing ourselves to the media. And at those times, I think it's very easy, subtly, unconsciously, the more we're immersed in that uncritically, to begin to take on the worldview of the media. And my point was that worldview is that God's not active in the individual affairs of daily life. And so we begin to feel a little more odd because we're not fitting into what we're beginning to think is the normal view of the world. And so I wasn't so much thinking of the internet. I think, again, it cuts both ways on the internet. It's good. It's certainly, we all know that the pornographic element, it's opened a whole new window there. Well, that's bad. And as Carl said, we've got to adapt in a godly way.
But I also think we need to be more critical as well on the grounds that pornography is an interesting one. We all know it's wrong, and we can all generally avoid it if we put our minds to it. It's the things that aren't obviously wrong, but which are sending continual signals to us that I think are problematic. Commercials. It's quite stunning moving from the UK to the United States. Even our commercial channels, I think you're allowed something like 6 minutes of commercials for every hour of television. So 10% of television time is commercials. Here I've not timed it, but it seems to be a lot more than 10%. But commercials, what are they doing? They're selling dissatisfaction, because they're trying to sell you something. They're making you dissatisfied, and they're projecting images of happiness that's found in terms of material possessions. most of us would say, oh, there's an NC-17 film on tonight, I'm going to switch the television off, I'm not going to watch it. But we're quite happy for our kids to sit there and have these messages about the meaning of life equaling material possessions sent to them 15 minutes out of every hour. So I think in terms of media, we need to be much more critical and thoughtful than we generally are. The analogy I use at Westminster, and I've talked about these things, is pornography and violence. It's like the guy running down your street wielding a chainsaw wearing a ski mask. You see him coming, you get into your house, you lock the door, you phone the police. Commercials, things like that, it's like sitting in your house and the chimney is blocked and the house is slowly filling up with carbon monoxide. And by the time you realize the deadly danger's there, it's too late. You're already dead.
So whether it's content or the way in which we're thinking, we have to fight to protect our minds, to renew our minds, and to keep thinking, right? I mean, we're talking about whether media lead us down a path of thoughtlessness or bitty information. I think that's not unique to our age necessarily, in that every age before us has had to fight to stay connected with their Bibles, right? To keep thinking, keep praying. It was hard in the 17th century for Luther's barber to keep praying.
If you read Blaise Pascal's thoughts, 17th century French Christian philosopher, when he describes the French court, he's describing a world that is just preoccupied with pleasure, the spectacular, and the moment. It could be describing Britain or America today.